Welcome to the Calm Cockpit Podcast, the show that helps pilots think clearly, stay calm, and perform at their best when it matters most. Each episode delivers practical strategies, real-world aviation wisdom, and mindset tools that help create confident pilots and safe flights.
What's the biggest obstacle to becoming a pilot? Is it mastering landings? Learning weather? Passing the checkride? I don't know. But for many student pilots, it's something much more basic. It's finding money to keep going and staying mentally sharp enough to succeed when the pressure is on.
Today's guest tackled both problems in a way most people never would. When flight training became financially out of reach, he didn't quit. Instead, he bartered his professional marketing and web design skills in exchange for flight instruction, allowing him to fly 5 to 6 days a week and earn his private pilot certificate in just 3 months.
But he didn't stop there. After experiencing the stress of prepping for his own check ride, he asked himself another question. What if pilots had a way to practice the oral exam anywhere and train their minds not to just memorize answers?
That question became Checkride Coach, an AI-powered platform that helps pilots think through scenarios, explain their decisions out loud, and build the kind of calm confidence that comes from repeated practice under realistic conditions.
So let's meet private pilot, entrepreneur, educator, and creator of Checkride Coach, DeRonte Craig.
The Calm Cockpit Podcast starts now.
Mike Oscar, runway 27, clear for takeoff.
Welcome, everyone, to today's episode. I'm Geeta Brown, midlife student pilot and yoga and music educator with over 30 years of teaching high performers how to improve their lives and performance, but without adding stress.
And I'm John Niehaus, corporate pilot and flight instructor.
One of the things we come back to again and again on this podcast is that aviation is so much more than stick and rudder skills. Flying is a cognitive task, and every flight asks us to process information, manage workload, make decisions, and communicate and adapt. The airplane matters, but so does the pilot's mind. And particularly for those of us in check ride prep, yes, I'm looking at myself, we're not just testing memory, it's really testing how well you've integrated your knowledge into real-world decision-making.
Exactly. The FAA isn't looking for someone who can recite the textbook. They're looking for someone who can actually think like a pilot and understand the answers and what they're saying. That means that connecting weather with airspace, regulations with risk management, aircraft performance with aeronautical decision-making, all while staying calm enough to explain what you're actually thinking. These are skills that take practice, not just studying, but practice.
And today's guest has been thinking about that same problem from a very different direction. Joining us today is DeRonte Craig, which he also goes by Craig, and he's a private pilot, entrepreneur, and educator. And his path into aviation really required creative thinking. I can't wait for you to hear his story. And instead of letting the cost of flight training stop him, he bartered his professional marketing skills for flight instruction. And as I said in the intro, he flew 5 to 6 days a week and earned his private pilot certificate in just 3 months. But he started this really big mission after he earned his certificate. And he started asking, why is prepping for a check ride still so dependent on memorization? And how can I leverage my skills in business to help pilots practice in the way that they will actually be evaluated?
So that question led Craig to create Checkride Coach, an AI-powered conversational training program that lets pilots practice the oral exam, work through realistic scenarios, identify knowledge gaps, and develop the confidence that comes from repeatedly thinking and speaking like a pilot on your schedule. It's not about replacing instructors. It's about giving pilots another way to build the mental flexibility and communication skills that every safe aviator needs.
Yeah, so if you're working on your private pilot certificate, or maybe prepping for that instrument rating, or you're just simply interested in how we learn complex skills under pressure, I think you'll find today's conversation with Craig really practical and thought-provoking and also inspiring because I really love his story. We'll take you to the interview now, and John and I will see you at the end for a little wrap-up discussion. So enjoy this interview with DeRonte Craig.
Craig, welcome to the Calm Cockpit.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited.
Yeah, so are we. I know that you've had a long journey to get to where you are in aviation, and I think it's really interesting how this whole thing came together. So one of the things I want to start out with in this interview is just tell me the amazing story. Tell me the process. How did becoming a private pilot and going into sort of your aviation experience become part of your life?
Honestly, it started off as a pretty awesome story. I went to a college for undergrad. I went to Bowie State University in Bowie, Maryland. I grew up in D.C. and Prince George's County, Maryland. If you know anything about the DMV area, like the two places are pretty interchangeable. And so I decided to go to school in the area. And while I was there, I studied business administration and entrepreneurship. And I had a professor who was one of my favorite professors, Professor Lashley. This was my favorite class. It was like the introduction to business. One of the exciting things about that class was he took an unorthodox approach. So one of the things throughout his classes, on Thursdays, I would ask him, "Hey, Prof, what are you doing this weekend?" And he'd go, I think I'm going to take the plane out. I'm going to fly to Ocean City this weekend. And then next weekend, I'm going to go to New Jersey or Atlantic City. I thought it was so fascinating because I didn't know anybody who flew. Monday would come and he would tell me all about his adventure. And I thought it was super cool. And I was just like, wow, like one day, like I can do that. And so during this year long of just learning about his stories, I asked, "Hey, Prof, like, what can I do to get my private pilot license? Like, what can I do to become a pilot?" Like, I didn't know that there were even levels to it in certifications and ratings. He was like, "Oh, you're just go to the military. It's super expensive." He was like, "I wouldn't pay for it." And he was a veteran. I later found out that he learned in the military. And so he just told me to just do it that way. And I was like, okay, let me think about this. Now, my grandfather was in the military. I had a lot of uncles and a lot of friends now that are in the military, but I wasn't quite sure if that was like the path I wanted to take because remember, I'm studying business management and entrepreneurship. So my whole idea and dream was like to build these companies and startups and things like that. So I just ultimately was like, okay, well, that's just dead in the water. I didn't think that I'd become a pilot. Now, force fast several years, I moved to California. I go to UC Irvine to get my master's. After a while of being here, I've been in California for about 7 years. I started to build a community and a group of people. And I ran across this guy who was a pilot, but he was also in the military. He was Marine. And I was like, he was telling me about his journey in flying. I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. You must have learned in the military." He said, "No, actually, I just went over to John Wayne. I started to work at the FBO. I built relationships with people. I found the CFI. We had a good relationship. I asked him to teach me, and then it started from there." So he's an instrument rated pilot, and he got his license, and he basically broke down the journey of how he did it. I was like, wow, I didn't even know that was an option. And so I think later that year, my girlfriend at the time, my birthday was coming up and she took me on a discovery flight. It was an amazing experience. Like I learned how to do emergency descents. I learned how to do a steep turn. Anybody who takes a discovery flight instantly gets that bug. And so
It's true.
I was like, I have to do this. So I started to figure out and start the hunt. And so I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how, but I originally knew that this was going to be expensive because I started to look it up. And so I immediately, before I did anything, I actually just started applying for scholarships. I didn't know that this would help me later on, but it did. So I started applying for scholarships. I probably applied for like 3, AOPA, OBAP, and a few others. And then I was like, well, I got to figure out when I can actually get the money. And it seemed like it was going to be far out. And then I started to lean in on some of my skills. And I was like, there has to be a school out there who just needs help with like marketing, web design or something. And so I started to do research. I started to reach out to a bunch of flight schools. I was actually looking at some of my old emails yesterday and I seen a bunch of schools that just left me on red or some that replied and were like, "Oh, we're not really interested." And there was an airfare at the Compton Woodley Airport. And I decided to go on a Saturday. Like I had a day full of events and I just so happened to be like, I'm going to just pop up and go there this morning really quickly. I'll be there for no more than an hour. I go there. I had a great time. And then I run into this guy named Demetrius Harris, who was the CEO of Fly Compton Foundation. And quick conversation, literally as I'm leaving out and walking, I run into him and we introduced ourselves. I told him what I did. And he was like, "Oh, we actually might need some of those services." And I was like, "Oh, this is perfect. Left that day, went running my errands, and then like the next week I put together a proposal, kind of planned out all the things that I would help them do. And then we kind of worked out the agreement and deal on how I can become a pilot and fly. And so from there, that's kind of when my aviation journey started. I started though doing ground school, which took me a lot longer than I planned on it. But after that, I started flying like 5 to 6 times a week. And then 3 months later, I got my private pilot license.
That's an amazing story. And when you originally told me the bits and pieces of that in our pre-show interview, I knew it was something that we had to talk about. And there's so much good stuff in this. And one of the things that I think translates very well for a lot of people in aviation, I think Geeta can probably second this, is the financial pressures of trying to do this. I mean, like you said, you go to a discovery flight and you realize this has been missing from my life the entire time and I didn't even know it. And now, at least for me, it was all I could think about. And then you sort of start to float back down to the ground and realize, I really want to do this, but my goodness, it is expensive. And there is a lot of pressure to be strict with your budget. And some of that leads to, I have to perform at my highest level so that I don't have to continually try to repeat these things. What did that pressure do to you? Like, how did it feel as you were getting into it going, oh my goodness, how do I conquer this mountain of what the cost is going to be?
That was really tough because I'll be quite frank with you. Being an entrepreneur is not easy. And a lot of times starting companies and businesses, there's times where you don't pay yourself. So I already knew that I wouldn't be able to just take money aside to actually dive into like this new passion or hobby, right? Because it wasn't even the idea starting off wasn't a career path. It was really just a hobby. And so that's kind of what took me along the path of like starting and going and applying to scholarships. But honestly, soon after that, the application process from the time you apply to when they process the applications, it takes so long that you don't even think that you're going to get selected. And so then it's like, okay, if I want to do this now, I need to figure out some other avenues. And then that's when I just decided to, use the skills that I had and kind of like figure out a way to barter and do service exchange how it used to work and operate like hundreds of years ago.
So one of the other things that I think is really empowering from your story, and first and foremost, kudos to you for finding scholarships, because one of the things that I have learned through the mentorship and outreach things that I have done is that it's like 90% of scholarships go unfulfilled.
Really?
Now that's a little bit of a made up number, but essentially a very high level percentage of scholarships either go completely unfulfilled or end up with like 2 or 3 people that actually apply, because they found that so many people, especially in aviation, they just don't feel like they're going to get it. So then, if I'm not going to get it, or if I don't feel like I have a chance, I'm just not going to apply. And so I tell kids all the time, like, it doesn't hurt to apply. The worst they're going to do is make you maybe write a short 1-page essay or something. To take an hour and write an essay for $5,000 or more, depending on what the scholarship is. I mean, it can be hugely impactful in your training. And again, having that influx of help to get your ratings, it definitely relieves that pressure on your mind to the ability of letting you focus on what you're doing versus, oh my God, how much is this going to cost? So kudos to you for going out there and putting yourself out there. And along with that, I think the other piece to this is showing up, right? I mean, the fact that you took the time to go to a place where there might be somebody who might even reject you, but you wanted to be there. Like, that's huge. So many people think nowadays that all of the conversations have to be either online or over the phone or via email or something like that. I mean, I got my first flight instruction job. I had called ahead to the flight school and said, hey, are you looking for instructors? They said no. I said, okay, I don't have anything going on today. Do you mind if I just show up and tour the facility? Like, I don't really even know what a flight school of that size looks like or how it operates. And they said, I guess so. I don't know why you'd want to drive the half hour out here, but sure, if you want to show up, we'll shake your hand and say hello. Long story short, I walked away with a job and they didn't know they were going to hire me. I didn't know that they even had an opening. Next thing I know, they're like, hey, show up on Monday and we'll get you going. So for you, in your case, to show up to, you said it was like an air show, right?
Airfare, yeah.
Yeah, to show up to that, meet with somebody, an effort to get your flight training paid for through an exchange of services. I mean, that's a story I don't think I've really ever heard of before, and leveraging those marketing skills that you have to get that going. I mean, I know you sort of already explained it, but like, how did you get into the mindset of I'm going to exchange my business skills for this passion of mine? Like, how did those two things really connect?
I think it just has a lot to do with agency, being here in California, because I've been here for 7 years and I originally got here to get my master's at UCI. But when I first moved here, I actually didn't have a place to stay, right? And so I had like a 2 week reservation to an Airbnb, and then I had a full scholarship to this university. And I know I was going to be there and I had to get there. And honestly, just using my resources and just thinking about other ways and opportunities. I mean, that story started off that way, but I've been in California for a very long time now. And I was talking to the CEO now of Fly Compton, and she was like, you're kind of built different. Like, if there's something that you want, you actually go after it. And whenever I have like tasks or ideas, I literally will brainstorm every possible outcome, every possible way that it can happen. And so for me, essentially, I had a problem and I needed a solution. And so I started with the problem and figured out what are some ways that I can get the outcome that I want by working backwards. So if I want to get a private pilot license, there's a whole bunch of flight schools out here, but I noticed I'm the one doing all the research to try to find the schools, but none of the schools are actually working the opposite way and marketing to me so I can actually find them. And so as a marketer, that was like a light bulb that just went off. Like, well, this might mean that a lot of these schools out here are actually missing. And then once you start to dive in and dig, you then discover, whoa, a lot of these flight schools have been around since the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and then their website looks the same. Or the person that answers the phone has been the same person that answers the phone for a long time. They don't have online booking system that automatically books, takes your payment, and schedule a discovery flight. Once I started to look at the world that I'm in and how I was applying a lot of these things, all the businesses and the clients that I had, and I noticed that this industry and space just completely was missing it. I was like, okay, this is a no-brainer.
It's so funny you said showing up, John, and I literally at the top of my page, I wrote showing up with 2 arrows next to it. It's so huge because it can be super intimidating to walk into those conferences or meetings or air shows where like everyone seems to know everyone else. And it takes a lot to just show up and not only do that, but to walk up to someone and start a conversation. So kudos on that one. I hear a couple of things though, when you said how you do all of this is having that sense of agency. I see you having definitely the mind of a pilot, like walk the target backwards. I want to achieve this goal, and now let me brainstorm every possible way that it could happen. But I also hear this little leap of faith thing. I mean, you moved out that you had a full scholarship to school, so you knew that was set, and you had a place for 2 weeks. But a lot of people would be like, but what am I going to do after that? They'd be so kind of frozen that they didn't have their living situation settled that it might stop them from honestly even going to the Airbnb. So there's like this element of planning and precision that you have, but there's also definitely a little bit of leap and the net will appear. Is that something intentional, or do you just come by that naturally, or is it a faith-based practice for you? You have faith, in God and the universe. How do you handle that uncertainty?
I think the heavier portion of that is faith. I genuinely just believe everything will work out for me. A lot of times that looks like everything is great, but sometimes that looks like the ship is sinking. But sometimes that is just removing me from one place to prepare for another. Someone gave me this example several years ago. I think I was an undergrad, and I have never looked at what we a theme is negative things badly again. Because I used to fly a lot when I was in college, and I would think of, well, if I missed the flight today or the flight got canceled, instead of getting upset, I think, okay, God, what are you preparing me for, or what are you protecting me from? Let's say I'm driving and I'm in a rush to get somewhere, but I get stopped at a light. Me getting stopped at a light could have been the difference maker of someone not paying attention and T-boning me, or someone jumping out the street. So I believe good things will come to me. I think I put out a lot of good things. And so I think essentially faith just comes. I also think it's just a part of being an entrepreneur. We don't always have it figured out. I mean, we're betting on ourselves and taking calculated risks, but we don't know it's going to work out until it does. When I was in my master's program or just starting several projects, a lot of times we have to go through a period of just testing and seeing if the market is even interested or even wants this. And you won't know unless you do it. So I knew that for me, I grew up in the DMV. The DMV will always be the DMV, but California is uncharted territory. So I'd rather go out here, test it out, try it, and try my hardest. And if it didn't work out, I just come back.
I love it. You have a total growth mindset, but I do think it's so important that when you're starting something new to say, whatever the outcome, judging it if it's quote unquote success or quote unquote failure, it's leading me exactly where I need to go. Having that in your head before you do things makes then if you have a stumble or a fall, you take it in a really different way than if you're hinging your success and your self-definition on the outcome that you're going to get. So I love that growth mindset and that belief that it's all for my good. Love it.
Absolutely.
I'm going to think of that next time I'm sitting in Boston traffic, okay? I'm going to be Craig
please
told
remember me.
that this is protecting me or it's leading me to something good. So I'm going to let it go and sit here and listen to my podcast.
Absolutely.
I love it because one of the sort of stereotypes, and forgive me to my flight school and pilot business owners out there, pilots are notoriously not great business people. And as you mentioned with the flight schools and stuff, I mean, the flight schools, a lot of them don't last all that long, and they focus on the flying aspect, and they focus on the fact that they created the flight school because they love teaching instruction, like flight instruction, or they love airplanes or pilots or any of those aviation related things. And then the business side of things kind of gets pushed off into the background. And I love how you found that opening of like, hey, this is a great need for you. How did that conversation go when you were talking with them? When you had to suggest, hey, maybe your website's a little bit outdated, or you don't have any marketing whatsoever. Like you mentioned, students have to come find you. You're not looking for students. Was there a defensiveness in the flight school, or was it just an immediate like, oh, thank God we need help? How did that go?
With that opportunity, it was just like divine intervention and like perfect timing, because literally he was actively looking for someone to help with these different areas and categories. Now, going back, I just told you guys, like I literally was just looking at some of the emails that I sent out. There were a lot of people who just left me on red, or a lot of people who just immediately go, no, thank you. And I'm also kind of going through that now because I still do marketing, and I've decided to kind of like shift some of my focus into the aviation space. And so one of the things me and my team is doing is we're finding these websites from these flight schools who are absolutely horrible, and then we're redesigning it. We're taking all the time and making that investment up front. And I record a video and send it to them and say, hey, this is how your site can improve, and this is what will help you guys actually perform better, get more people at the location, and more discovery flights. More discovery flights means more potential students. Some of them don't even open it, which is okay. It's a part of business. It's sales. And some of them will look at it, and then they will look at their website, and then they'll go, no, thank you. And it's astonishing to me, but it's just a part of the business and a part of the game. And then sometimes some of those people, I'm not the one for them. I can't help them. I'm not the problem solver for them. And maybe they'll figure it out later. Who knows? But then there's other people who I've talked to literally this week, told him what we were doing. And he was like, yeah, sure, send me the video. Your website is the face. When people come and look at it, you look outdated. You look old. Sometimes it just looks like you might not be safe, right? But if you have a new design space in branding, it gives you authority. It gives you agency. And makes people confident to come work. And so, again, that's some things that I understand coming from a marketing background. But when people work in their passion, the focus is typically in the passion, which would be the flying. They would rather not be bothered by the details of having to decide or cut checks for payroll and things like that. But you soon find that that's a part of the business that, especially most people don't actually like.
Finding those skills that you're good at. And that doesn't always have to be business. It could be any way that you see that they have a need, and taking the initiative to attempt that trade, which is something that you don't come across that a lot in today's day and age. The ability to, like you said, in times gone by, of trading a service for a service in a bartering style. It really catches me, because you just don't think that that's even a thing anymore. But the fact that it worked for you it's inspiring. When it came to your training and you had this idea already put in place and you've started trading some of your skills for services, did you feel like the alleviation of that additional pressure, that additional stress made your training go a little bit easier? Was it less anxiety on that side that allows your mental performance to catch up with what your flight instructor's trying to tell you what to do?
Oh, 100%. 100%. My CFI, amazing kid, man. He's actually 22. He's super young. And he was, I think he was 21 when he started training me. And so he actually he was a product of Fly Confident Foundation. He was one of the students who went through trainings every weekend, went through the summer solo camp. And then after you get to your summer solo camp, they actually are basically granted the opportunity with a scholarship from the foundation to actually further your training. So they help you get from your private pilots all the way to CFI. That's the whole goal. And then they will come back and hire you. And so like he had maybe like 2 or 3 students before me, but I was his first solo. I was his first PPL pass. I was his like everything, because I didn't have the constraints of like worrying about the finance part. I literally was able to just study in the morning and then in the evening book a flight, hop on a plane and work on the training. Because I had such a cushion, literally I was able to fly 5-6 days out of the week. And that's how I was able to actually solo in a good amount of time, but also, get my private pilot license in that 3-month period. If I did have to worry about like finances, what happens with a lot of people is they might fly, and then they run out of money right before they solo. And then they'll have to wait to find some money. And then they might take a lesson here or a lesson there. And then you realize, okay, you're not ready to solo yet. And so then that gets pushed back. And then you get discouraged. And then you have to scrounge up more money. And then you go back and take 1 or 2 more lessons. And then you get really, really close, but then you don't have enough money again. This constant pattern happens. And that's why sometimes it takes people maybe 9 months to a year to get their license. Because a lot of times what happens is you have to relearn the same lessons over and over again. But if you're able to get all the finances together, what you learned on Monday, you're going to be applying by Tuesday or Wednesday, and you'll be ready by Friday to do whatever it takes. So working this deal out played a huge difference. Like a huge difference. My CFI, he still has some students who haven't solo yet, but that's because they're taking such long gaps. If I was a CFI, I wouldn't sign you up to solo today if the last time I flew with you was 3.5 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago. That's such a big gap. And then, for us having currency 90 days, if you don't fly for a month, getting back in that plane, things kind of feel a little scary. And this is as a certified pilot, maybe even some commercial pilots. But, as a student wanting to come back with such a big gap, I wouldn't sign off either.
As an instructor myself, I completely agree. And it's kind of heartbreaking because in a lot of cases, the student is capable, they're qualified, you've done their training, what they can do. Yeah, life happens and 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, they come back and I'm sorry to tell you, let's just go do 3 landings so that I can be sure because in my head, even though I think you're good, and you probably are, if I don't do that check and something happens, like I have to live with that. And that's just, I can't deal with that. It would weigh on me forever. So I totally get that. And it inspires me a little bit. Gita, have you offered like private yoga lessons to your instructor to see if they'll knock a little bit off your bill? Like, I think there's some work to be done.
I haven't done that. I might be like, hey man, would you like to have a meditation? Some free meditation sessions. I have never thought of that. I've kept the 2 worlds kind of separate, but I think there's a brilliance in that. And I love how you did it like in a concentrated period of time. I mean, me as a midlifer, some different responsibilities. I've had to go the slow route of start and stop and start and stop. And I had to make my peace with that. But I think if you can do it, to have that intense focus is great, and particularly have the money piece of it figured out. Huge stress relief for the brain, because then you can just dial into the training. I am doing a little piece of that though in prep for checkride. Like the next 3 weeks, there's nothing on my plate except for flying, and it is way different than trying to fit flying in around the myriad other responsibilities I have as a 50-plus-year-old woman. It's very different, but I think your journey is just super inspiring. That's so cool. And I love that you were like, your flight instructor's first solo, first, because that's a bond that you guys will have forever, wherever his career goes and wherever yours goes. That's a really cool and added bonus to, I think, how you did everything. It's super cool.
It's really interesting too, because I went to Bowie State University for undergrad, and I'm an adjunct professor there. So like I am the teacher. But then in this cockpit and in this plane, the roles are reversed. In any other space, because he was in college, he was getting his degree at Cal State Fullerton. Like I legitimately would be his professor, but I'm humble enough to be, this kid, he knows it and I trust him and he's my instructor. So in this plane, he has it. But if we were in the classroom in academics, I would be the one.
Well, they say the best teachers are the best students. So whenever I'm a student anywhere, I just put my teacher hat aside. I'm here just to be a student completely. Tell me what to do. That's it. Great attitude. Love it.
No, I love the fact that you guys already did sort of the segue for me. You started talking about check rides. And one of the other things that we talked in the pre-show discussion, and it really stood out to me, was the idea of this mental side of check rides and how you prepare and kind of what's lacking in that preparation process. Craig, talk to me a little bit about what was your check ride preparation like, and what did you see that were gaps in that process that, we'll get to kind of how we want to fill those, but how did you discover that stuff?
Okay. So the day that I realized, okay, I was ready to start check ride prep, me and my instructor, we did some unusual attitudes. After that, I had like a 0.5 left. And after that, we landed the plane. I kind of like did all the hours that I needed done. It was like, all right, go study. What do you mean go study? Like, what am I supposed to do? And so I connected with another guy who was also in check ride prep phase. And so we came to my house. We studied at the airport. We did it for like a few days. And we were just cracking open the books and literally just trying to read everything. And I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work. So we ended up having a ground session with my instructor. And then he kind of gave us the outline of all the things you do. So that session was just him literally grilling us, asking us a bunch of questions. And I was like, okay, I have an idea and a structure for how I need to prepare. What I wanted to do was maximize the time that I had alone. So then when I did come back to the airport and we were in the clubhouse, I would have all the questions answered. I would have my ACS tabbed out and I could be prepared. So when I met with him, I wanted those to be as close to a check ride experience as possible. So I did most of the work on the back end on my side. And so what that looked like, meeting with the other students, I ended up building something called Check Ride Coach, which would allow me or basically ask me any question in the aviation space. I can honestly select what categories, but ask me anything and I wanted to be prepared. And so on days after work, I would go on walks and I'll have this playing, ask me questions and I'll respond and it'll give me feedback. And this is right, but you are missing this, or you completely missed this. Or sometimes there were questions I was like, I don't even know that. And so using this kind of helped me really prepare, especially get better when it came to my mock check rides. And so my mock check rides was where I got the heavier feedback. And so all these things combined really just prepared me to walk into my check ride, even though I was terrified and shaking walking in there. I've done all this studying. I've used the app. I knew almost every page in the book. And I remember driving up to the airport for the check ride with my CFI. And I'm just sitting there ask me more questions. Please ask me some more. And he's like, I think you got it. Yeah, you're good. Relax. And so I remember just being in this room as we waited DPE to come in. They were just talking because they've known each other for a while. And that guy did all his check rides. And so they just shooting it and having a good time. And I'm over here just, and come the check ride officially starts. And we had some conversations, especially because I didn't have the best written exam score. It was great. The check ride went well and I passed it on the first try and it was all she wrote.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, similar to the website for the flight school that you discussed, training towards that mental side of a check ride, or even like you said, the written test, that hasn't changed in decades. And that's not to disparage the training companies, because the resources that they're putting out, the books, the study guides, all of that stuff, great materials. Okay. But it doesn't work for everybody. I mean, that's the first thing that we learn as CFIs, is that people learn and retain knowledge differently. And yet, as an industry, we just tell everybody, okay, you want to go take the written test, go read this book. Memorize these questions, which we're not supposed to do because everybody wants you to know what the answer is, not memorize the answer. But we know At the end of the day, there's a certain amount of memorization, whether we want to admit it or not, that does happen. And so it's an exciting time in the industry right now with all of these things coming out, that we're moving beyond just study this study guide or read this book or make flashcards or tab out your FAR-AIM. Those are all good things to do, but it's like the industry woke up and people like you have shown up and said, I've got an idea. Let's give this a try. It may work. It may not. But if it does, look at the good that it can do. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into this, because you sort of mentioned your AI voice coach, this check ride coach, but I want to know, what is it? How does it work? Where did it come from? Let's dig in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So check ride coach initially just came from that gap of not knowing what to study when my CFI told me to study, and then what those experiences like when I did the mock check ride. And so what Check Ride Coach essentially is a web platform that allows you and helps you prepare for your check ride through conversation like we're talking right now. So what it does, it takes your written exam scores, it evaluates that, and then creates a plan for you that maps out all the things you need to do to prepare up until your check ride. So it knows what you got wrong, it knows what areas you need to improve on, and it knows what the DPE will essentially ask you. So inside the platform, it takes that information and it breaks it up in categories, and then you can start a session. And just like we're talking now, it will ask you questions about weight and balance. It will ask you scenario-based questions. It'll ask you questions about aerodynamics or airspaces, but it'll ask you in a way and present it in a way that DPEs do. You know, I know a lot of other platforms that exist now, a lot of them are just like text-based, like you read it and you type in your answer. But this one has a conversation with you just like it would in the room. And we also have some other features. We have the study plan. We also have a lot of like FAA resources. We have flashcards. This is a bunch of different resources that we kind of put together that I've found and seeing that, you know, this was best. It also has an AI assistant. Like I can ask it any question and I can type it in and then it'll kick out an answer to me. It'll tell me where to find it in my ACS on my far aim. It'll tell me what the answer is and highlight some things and also gives me a memory aid. So some of the things that I might need to remember it. So like all the things that my CFIs at the flight school that I was at were helping me with, I kind of encapsulated it in one space. And so I worked with them. I recorded our ground sessions. I used books. I took a bunch of notes. I created a bunch of different scenarios and I kind of all compiled it into one space that people can use. Because out of all the things that I've done when I was studying on my own, the thing that helped me most and I thought was fascinating was when I was getting asked questions and I was able to answer and get feedback right there whenever I needed.
So cool. The world has changed a lot since I was in college and we would just have to question each other and we had books. That's what we had. I love that you can actually have a conversation with this. I guess it's the AI master of checkride prep. That's so cool.
So I've been getting a lot of questions. So right now we're only focusing on PPL. Just open it up for all users now, but we're still doing a lot of testing. We're building relationships with a lot of flight schools, as well as universities. I've had a few calls the last 2 weeks with some universities that are willing to bring it on board. And so a lot of that will start in the fall semester coming, but we're still growing, still training it, reiterating it. And soon we will be able to then add instrument rating, commercial, and so on and so forth. But I can only move as fast as I can go. So I'm not an instrument rated pilot yet. And so I don't know what that experience is like, but I am bringing people on board that have these experiences that can help us as we grow and develop these different areas of the app.
So asking for a friend, Gita, how does one come across these tools? Like, where would you find this? What does it take to actually give this thing a try?
Got it. So you can go to www.checkride.coach. I would recommend using it on your computer. We have a mobile version, but what I found is that when people use their computer or their iPad, they can just focus and not have their phone. So my recommendation, go to that website and you should be able to sign up. It's open and available. We had a wait list and we were limiting who could come in, but now we're kind of lifting that wait list to get more people to test it out. So it's kind of like a small trial. And if you like it, join the community so you can get unlimited access. www.checkride.coach.
I am totally going to play with this. It sounds awesome. It does sound more like realistic because I will like chew up a big content, and like study the books and watch the videos and do the navlog and do all of that. But at the end of the day, you're right. You have to be able to have a conversation with someone about it. And even with a flashcard, it's not the same as someone asking you a question out loud and then repeating it. I think that's really cool. And I'm sure the more people that use it, like you said, the more robust and the better it's going to get just with constantly feeding it all the information. So it's like, it's a growing organism on the internet. Yeah. That's really cool.
Gita, as our sort of resident educational expert, what's going on in a student's brain in terms of recollection and memory when someone's communicating verbally with something versus just reading something? Like, how does that change your learning experience fundamentally?
Yeah, it's mostly a function of a product of consolidation. I mean, particularly if you're talking about this stage, when you've studied the information, you've had practical application in the airplane or, as a musician in the performance space, you've had some information, you've had some theory, you've applied it in a practical way. when someone asks you a question, your brain is then doing that consolidation. So it's pulling from all of the neural pathways that have been built, and they might just be like little baby neural pathways, right? There's a little area over here about airspace that's been lit up, and then there's a little area over here about VFR weather minimums, but they haven't actually like connected in your brain in a meaningful contextual way. So when someone asks you a question, your brain is forced to make a connection and make those connections between those diverse areas that you've learned thicker and stronger. They actually show that the area of your brain that connects the left and the right hemisphere gets stronger and thicker with this kind of work. So you're literally changing the structure of your neuroanatomy, which blows my mind. But question and answers do that because they force you to consolidate the information, which is why it's great to practice it before the check ride, right, Craig? You don't want to be sitting in there and just sit in a room by yourself and study, or maybe have done one mock check ride with your CFI, but on a daily or every couple of days basis, I've been throwing a book at my husband and say, just ask me questions. But he doesn't know. He's reading from a book. So I like this AI assistant better, who has all of the resources of the FAA at its disposal to really check my answer in a more nuanced way. So yeah, it's fantastic for the brain to do this. So and honestly, it feels more like play to me to have a conversation than always sitting and studying by myself. It can get a little stale and heavy. So I think you're lightening the load for people too psychologically, to just have it be something fun.
Essentially, that is it. And that's why I started using it on walks and things like that. Because when you sit at a desk for several hours and you look at a book that isn't friendly back to you and using language that you don't use on a regular basis until you started flying, it becomes heavy and load bearing. But when I started to use this and do this, it kind of made it easier, and it made it more accessible, right? Because I can be anywhere. Okay, let me think about, airspaces. Ask me questions about airspaces, and it just does it. And, I don't want to lug my far aim around every day. So
you don't? Come on.
Well, and I think that there's also something fundamental from a student standpoint of being able to recall things during a distraction. So you mentioned being able to do it on a walk. I used to take certain things with students and say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take this book and I want you to balance a ball on top of the book while I ask you questions. Because the second that you're distracted, all of a sudden your brain starts having a difficulty recalling the information. So then they start to think about the answer and then the ball falls off the book. It's like, okay, well, that's not good enough, right? It's not good enough to be able to recall it when there's nothing else going on, because in an airplane, there's all kinds of things going on all at once. You're not going to be able to stop, push pause on the airplane, pull over and recall that information. You are expected to be able to do it all together. And so having the ability to kind of take the memory recollection and amp it up with some sort of distraction while you're washing clothes, folding clothes, doing dishes, cooking, walking, riding a bike. Well, maybe not riding a bike. Doing something else, if you can recall that information during that process, then you actually learned it.
That's a really good idea, balancing the book and the ball, especially for students who are working on the instrument, because you learn that you can fall behind so quick, and there's so much going on. There's so much going on. So I that's a new study habit that I'm going to take with me.
Yeah. And I mean, the other piece to this is I used to always, and it was something my instructors did for me and I always did for my students, was it's one thing for a instructor to do check ride prep with a student and you get that information passed along, but then also the student starts to get two things. A, they get comfortable with you, and B, they get used to the way you're asking questions. Yeah. So if I ask you one question and you've spent 40 hours with me already, probably the next question is going to be this. And then it becomes predictable and then it becomes comfortable. And then all of a sudden they sit down with an examiner who asks the exact same question with slightly different words. And all of a sudden, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so having my students go with another instructor to essentially do the same check ride prep that we did together maybe the day before, you never know what you're going to uncover by doing that. And so having another system developed where that system can create multiple different ways of asking the same question in a different tone, with different wording, in a different context, in a different scenario, like that changes everything for somebody to basically say, I understand this material, and no matter what way you ask me, I'm going to be able to produce the answer that you're looking for. That's huge. That changes learning altogether.
You are spot on, because I remember a few ground sessions with my CFI, and you're right. He does ask the same questions because, each person's different. But then he sent us with the club CEO. He sent us with other pilots. He sent us with other CFIs, and then they would ask just completely different questions that he wouldn't even ask, because the way people's brain think is just completely different. And so you're 100% spot on and right with that.
My favorite technique was always are you sure? Or, is
Yeah.
that it?
Yeah.
But that only works for so long too, because I can only play that game with the same person before they know that I'm just, full of nonsense. Like, just they know to stop talking when I really want them to just dig that hole a little bit further. And so again, having that different tone, that different perspective from somebody else or something else in this case, that allows you to not fall so easily for some of those additional tricks. Tell me that this voice coach can get somebody to fall for something like that. Will it try to dig to see how far you're willing to go?
It does. So essentially, like on this level, it typically asks you questions. And if you miss something, it has the ability to ask follow-up questions, which I like. And then sometimes if you miss it, it just, tell you what the answer is. Others, for example, if I ask a question and I say, I don't know, it can just come in and just give you that answer. So yes, it does. And so now what we're trying to do is kind of create more feedback systems in a way. When we're all going through our check ride, we all learn to keep it simple, stupid, to say as little and as less as possible.
Yes.
But when the machine knows the full answer, it knows that you're missing stuff. So what we're working on doing is asking follow-up questions, maybe 2 to 3 times to get the full answer. And so that is one of the new challenges that we're working on now. But I think in the next month or so, it should be able to do it flawlessly, exactly the way we plan on it.
I want to see it do the reverse. I want to see it know that you already gave the full answer and ask if you've got anything else.
I'm going to put these down in my notes.
That's where students get into trouble, is they don't know when to stop.
Now AI is going to play mind games with us.
That's right. That's right.
Are you sure? I think so.
But that's a valuable experience.
It
Again,
is.
I used to purposefully do that to students, and my instructors did it to me. So it's, we're passing on this this torture, I guess. But the word salad is a bad thing, right? Like, are you sure? And next thing you know, the students are digging and they're talking all of a sudden about landing gear when you were asking them about aerodynamics. And you're like, what are you doing? So it's that pressure of like, they're asking me, am I sure? Am I missing something? When the real answer is, no, you just told me everything. I just want to see if you're willing to make stuff up.
Another thing that we're constantly developing out, because I ran this by a DPE, and he was like, I like the concept idea. You should just make as many scenario-based examples as possible. So we're constantly building out those scenario-based instances because, like you said, everyone who's been training and preparing, they got the rote memory down, right? So they remember, 8 tomato flames and everything. He's like, but I really give it to them in scenario, and finding those answers through that are great. Because like, if you have a great DPE, honestly, when I did my check ride, it was just like I was sitting for an amazing aviation story, because everything he talked about was just a scenario, and it was an experience, and it was a story. And then I had points to interject and talk about, these different key points. So if you have a great DPE, your check ride, honestly, is really fun, but it's intimidating before you get in that room. And so he was telling me to create as many scenario-based example questions as possible, because those are the things that gets people tripped up. For example, you and 2 buddies plan a fight tomorrow. You guys are going to Vegas, and the morning of, one person doesn't, show up. Are you before or after? Like, what's your weight and balance going to look like? And then you calculate your weight and balance. Okay, on the way there, something happened. Your buddy's experiencing some weird circumstances. What might be these symptoms? Is it hypoxia? Like, what could be the case? We figure that out. And then, okay, you land, but this airport has a certain distance, and your plane is rated to this amount of landing distance. Can you make it? Okay. And so what we're trying to do is continue to build these stories and experience to make it like a check ride as much as possible.
Love it. Absolutely love it. What other advice do you have for people who have a check ride soon, like yours truly, beyond use your amazing AI check ride guide and keep practicing, keep training? What mental side of thing? Because you said it's super intimidating until you get in the room. And I find that to be with performance. I'm nervous right up until performance starts and then the nerves get channeled. It's usually the week or two before that is more challenging than the actual thing itself.
Two things I would say. The first one would be take break, because a lot of times what we end up doing is cramming and we overstudy, and then to a point where we just brain mashed potatoes. So you need to incorporate breaks in it. And I would say, like, if you're going to train, give yourself an hour or 2 hours, and in that time, maybe take 2 or 3 breaks in between. So just give yourself more to actually come back to. The other thing is keep flying. So when I got my check ride was like a month out from when I actually like done all my training. So I actually stopped flying for like a month because I didn't want to keep spending money. And then like I flew for like a week straight leading up to my check ride. When I got back into that plane, one of the things that we realized that I needed to work on was short field landing.
Oh, yeah. I can't imagine why.
So my recommendation is keep flying, keep working on those maneuvers. But more importantly, the thing that gets people, definitely work on those landings.
Perfect. So I just spent the last 2 days up, down, and around that pattern again and again and again and again and again. So thank you. That gives me great confidence. I think Check Ride Coach is so cool. I think it's really neat what you've created. I think it's going to be a big service. And I feel like it's not quite baby Check Ride Coach, but it's like Check Ride Coach Junior. And I think in 5 years, we have you back on the show, we'll see kind of how it's grown, because it sort of feels like it's the seed of an idea that's working now. But as you said, as people interact with it, it's just going to get more and more robust and really help people to train in a way that's meaningful for them to be safe aviators. So thank you for creating it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for listening to my story. Thanks for checking it out. And as we continue to develop and build interactions and also add people to the team, the more people we can add, the faster that we can grow. So I'm excited to even see, what this app looks like in 2 months from now, 3 months from now, even close to the end of the year. And one of our goals is to not only constantly, develop this for ourselves, but earlier we talked about gaps, with like flight schools. One of the things I would love to do is create this as a resource for a lot of flight schools that are out there, especially since we're starting to entertain that conversation and get them to test it out, but also universities as well. So in the future, you will see, maybe some announcements of us partnering with some flight schools and some universities.
Listeners, I hope you found that interview both inspiring and insightful. Craig is so positive. I mean, he's like relentlessly positive. I think in any career, and in particular flying, it could be really easy to get worn down over time. But I love his inherent belief that things will work out. It seems like not only such a positive way to live every day, but a way that's really going to be seeking the lesson and give you a way forward. And I see him being a really big mentor for a lot of future pilots and a lot of future entrepreneurs.
Craig's story is a powerful reminder that aviation has always been built by people who are willing to think a little bit differently. Whether it's designing a safer airplane, creating a new training method, or finding a creative solution to personal obstacles, innovation has always been part of aviation's DNA.
And I also think there's a lot of lessons from the conversation that go far beyond just how he earned his private pilot certificate. And I think a big takeaway for me was the importance of asking a different question. When he faced the financial challenge of flight training, he didn't simply ask, like, how can I afford it? And yes, he went the traditional route of scholarships, but he asked a totally different question, just tilted it a little bit and said, what resources do I already have that could create value for someone else? And that shift from, instead of looking at it as a barrier and turning it into an opportunity, is a really great mindset that applies not only to aviation, but also to life.
And then there's the lesson from Check Ride Coach that knowledge isn't truly useful until you can access it under pressure. Many pilots discovered during their check ride that knowing the answer and being able to explain the answer are two very different things. Okay. The ability to verbalize your thinking, connect concepts, and work through scenarios is what turns information into judgment. That's really the heart of good pilot training. We don't want pilots who can simply recite regulations and memorize procedures. We want pilots who can understand the why behind their decisions.
Absolutely. And I think from our sort of calm cockpit podcast perspective, there's another important piece, and this is about managing the mental side of aviation. Stress and uncertainty and pressure are pretty much a part of flying. As soon as we go wheels up, it's almost like the game changes. And the goal isn't to eliminate the stress and the uncertainty, but the goal is to really develop robust tools of preparation, awareness, and some breathing room to respond effectively when the stress and uncertainty shows up. So whether you're a student pilot like me, prepping for a check ride, or maybe you're an instructor looking for a way to support your students, I think there's a lot of lessons that Craig gave about creativity, resilience, and lifelong learning. And I kind of feel like hope for the future when I hear him talk. I'm like, if this is the direction we're going to be just fine.
And a huge thank you to DeRonte Craig for joining us and sharing his journey from finding an innovative way to fund his own training to building a tool designed specifically to help the next generation of pilots succeed. And as always, we hope this conversation helps you fly smarter, stress less, and remember that becoming a pilot isn't just about mastering the airplane, and it's also not just about finding a way to pay for the airplane. It's about mastering yourself.
To help you along in that journey, check out the show notes because we're going to link Craig's website there, and he has a free ebook there that I have downloaded. I can highly recommend. It's called Life Lessons from the Left Seat, a student pilot's guide to flying and living better. He did a really nice job of distilling the top lessons that he learned during his training. I think it's really worth a look. Following him on social media is also super inspiring. Keep an eye out for this young man because I see only great things ahead for him and really look forward to seeing the impact that his career has on the whole next generation of aviators. Really hoped you enjoyed that episode. And please drop us an email, calmcockpit@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you thought about the show. Give us some feedback, and of course, we'll share that with Craig. How else can the folks support our show, John?
Well, obviously, as always, you're listening to this right now, but remember that you can find us on any of the podcast streaming platforms. Tell your friends. We could really use some more in our Calm Cockpit community here. Drop us a review, maybe some stars. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Give us ideas if you have something specific that you'd like us to discuss, do some research on, talk about, whatever that looks like to you. And you can find us on social media, Calm Cockpit Podcast, sometimes just the Calm Cockpit. You'll find us either way, and fly smarter.
And stress less.
Airbus Air 1 departure is Airbus 321. Traffic holding crossing runway 33 left 3 lane.